The rain hammered against the windshield as Ethan Rivers gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. In the back seat, his 4-year-old daughter Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny, her innocent eyes watching the storm rage outside. He had exactly $47 in his bank account, a job interview in 15 minutes, and absolutely no idea that his entire life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. But what happened next would haunt him forever, and the woman waiting at the end of this rain-soaked journey would become either his salvation or his complete destruction. Evelyn Sinclair stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the storm paint the city in shades of gray. At 49 years old, she had built an empire from nothing, turning her late father's failing construction company into a multi-billion-dollar real estate development firm. Her long silky hair, the color of dark honey with streaks of silver she refused to hide, cascaded down her back in elegant waves. Her figure, maintained through discipline and dedication, was still the subject of whispered admiration in boardrooms across the country. Her skin, porcelain white and flawless, seemed to glow against the dark designer dress she wore. But beneath the perfect exterior, beneath the power suits and the commanding presence, Evelyn Sinclair was desperately, achingly lonely. Her husband had left her 12 years ago for a woman half her age, and she had sworn off love entirely, burying herself in work until she forgot what it felt like to be touched, to be wanted, to be seen as anything other than a walking checkbook. Ethan pulled into the parking garage of Sinclair Tower, his old sedan looking absurdly out of place among the Bentleys and Mercedes that surrounded it. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothing down his hair and adjusting the tie he had borrowed from his neighbor. Behind him, Sophie had fallen asleep, her small chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths. He hated bringing her to job interviews, but the daycare had closed early due to the storm, and he had no other options. His parents were gone, his ex-wife had vanished 2 years ago without a word, and the few friends he once had disappeared when the money dried up. The interview was for a driver position with Sinclair Enterprises, and Ethan knew it was a long shot. He had no formal experience as a professional driver, just years of navigating the city streets as a delivery man, a rideshare driver, and whatever else he could find to keep food on the table. But the salary listed in the job posting was more than he made in 3 months of cobbling together gig work, and it came with health insurance, something he desperately needed for Sophie's upcoming dental work. He gently lifted his sleeping daughter from the back seat, cradling her against his chest as he made his way to the elevator. The security guard at the front desk raised an eyebrow at the sight of them but said nothing, simply directing them to the 32nd floor where the interviews were being conducted. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that Evelyn Sinclair had fired her previous driver just that morning after discovering he had been selling information about her schedule to a rival company. She was in no mood for interviews, no mood for small talk, and absolutely no mood for the complications that were about to walk through her door. The elevator doors opened to reveal a waiting room that probably cost more to furnish than Ethan's entire apartment. Several other candidates sat in sleek chairs, all of them in expensive suits, all of them looking like they belonged in this world of marble floors and original artwork. Ethan, with his borrowed tie and sleeping child, felt like a fish flopping helplessly on a boat deck. He was about to turn around and leave, to accept that this world was never meant for people like him, when a voice cut through his spiral of self-doubt. "Mr. Rivers? Ethan Rivers?" A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile approached him. Her nameplate identified her as Margaret, executive assistant. "Yes, that's me," Ethan replied, shifting Sophie's weight on his shoulder. Margaret's eyes softened at the sight of the sleeping child. "I see you've brought a little assistant. Follow me, please. Mrs. Sinclair is ready to see you." "Mrs. Sinclair? I thought the interview was with the HR department." Margaret's smile turned slightly conspiratorial. "Mrs. Sinclair has decided to conduct the interviews personally. She's very particular about who drives her." Ethan felt his stomach drop. He had read about Evelyn Sinclair, had seen her face on magazine covers and in news articles. She was known for her sharp business acumen, her unwavering standards, and her ability to destroy anyone who crossed her with nothing more than a phone call. And he was about to walk into her office with a borrowed tie and a sleeping 4-year-old. The doors to Evelyn's office opened, and Ethan stepped into a room that seemed designed to intimidate. Everything was sleek, modern, and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the storm-ravaged city. And at the center of it all sat Evelyn Sinclair, her dark eyes immediately fixing on him like a predator assessing prey. But then something unexpected happened. Her gaze shifted to the sleeping child in his arms, and for just a moment, something flickered across her carefully controlled features. Something that looked almost like longing. "You brought a child to a job interview," Evelyn stated, her voice carrying no discernible emotion. "I apologize, Mrs. Sinclair. The daycare closed early due to the storm, and I had no other options. If you'd prefer to reschedule." "Sit down, Mr. Rivers." It wasn't a request. Ethan sat, carefully adjusting Sophie so she remained comfortable. The little girl stirred slightly but didn't wake. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, her eyes taking in the borrowed tie, the scuffed shoes, the way he held his daughter with such natural tenderness. She should dismiss him immediately. He was completely unqualified compared to the other candidates. He didn't have the experience, the polish, or the background she typically required. But something about him made her hesitate. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Rivers. And please, spare me the rehearsed answers. I've heard enough of those today to last a lifetime." Ethan met her eyes, and for a moment, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in years. A spark. A connection. She quickly dismissed it as fatigue. "I'm a single father," Ethan began, his voice low to avoid waking Sophie. "My daughter's mother left us when Sophie was 2. No note, no explanation, just an empty closet and a goodbye text. Since then, it's been just the 2 of us. I've worked every job you can imagine to keep us afloat. Delivery driver, rideshare, moving company, even a brief stint as a food truck cook when things got really desperate." He paused, a wry smile crossing his face. "I should probably mention that I'm an excellent cook, in case the driver position doesn't work out and you need someone to make you a mean grilled cheese." Despite herself, Evelyn felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "And what makes you think you're qualified to be my personal driver?" "Honestly? I'm probably not qualified by your standards. I don't have a fancy resume or letters of recommendation from senators. But I can tell you this, I have never been late to pick up my daughter from daycare, not once in 2 years. I navigate this city like I was born on these streets because, well, I was. And I am the most loyal person you will ever meet because I understand what it means to have nothing and to fight for everything." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, genuinely intrigued. There was something about his honesty, his refusal to pretend to be something he wasn't, that struck a chord deep within her. "You have a sharp tongue, Mr. Rivers. Some might call it impertinent. Some might call it charming," he countered, that wit of his emerging as both shield and sword. "But I understand if you're not looking for charm. I can be completely boring if that's what the position requires. I'll talk about the weather and traffic patterns and never once mention that your office smells like expensive perfume and poor decision-making in furniture placement." Evelyn's eyebrow arched dangerously. "Excuse me?" Ethan gestured toward her desk with his free hand. "The feng shui is all wrong. Your desk faces the door, which means you spend all day watching people come and go instead of focusing on your work. It's a power move, I get it. But it also means you never get a moment's peace. You're always on guard, always watching for the next threat. That's exhausting." Evelyn stared at him, completely caught off guard. No one spoke to her like this. No one dared. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Rivers. I've been told I'm a healthy mix of both." The silence stretched between them, and then Evelyn did something that shocked them both. She laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not the polished chuckle she used in board meetings, but a real, surprised burst of amusement. "You're hired," she said, before she could think better of it. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry. Don't make me repeat myself. Margaret will give you the details. You start Monday. And Mr. Rivers? Invest in a better tie. I have a reputation to maintain." As Ethan stood to leave, Sophie stirred in his arms, her sleepy eyes opening to take in the strange surroundings. She looked at Evelyn with the unfiltered curiosity of a child. "You're pretty," Sophie said simply. Evelyn felt something crack in her chest, something she had kept carefully sealed for over a decade. "Thank you," she managed, her voice softer than Ethan had heard it. "You're quite pretty yourself." Sophie smiled, then burrowed back against her father's shoulder. Ethan nodded at Evelyn, something passing between them that neither could name, and then he was gone. Margaret appeared in the doorway moments later, curiosity evident on her face. "You hired him?" Evelyn turned back to the window, watching the storm begin to clear. "I did. But he was the least qualified candidate." "I know." Margaret waited, but no explanation came. After 30 years of working for Evelyn Sinclair, she knew when to press and when to retreat. This was definitely a retreat moment. What neither of them could have predicted was that this impulsive decision would set into motion a chain of events that would challenge everything Evelyn believed about herself, about love, and about what it means to truly live. The first 3 months were a study in controlled professionalism. Ethan arrived every morning at exactly 6:45, the town car polished and ready. He drove Evelyn to meetings across the city, waited patiently during her endless negotiations, and delivered her home each evening to her sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town. Their conversations were brief, businesslike, confined to traffic updates and schedule confirmations. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. It started with small things. Ethan noticed that Evelyn never ate breakfast, subsisting on black coffee until her lunch meetings. So he started keeping a small cooler in the front seat, stocked with protein bars and fresh fruit. The first time he handed her an apple through the partition, Evelyn looked at him like he had lost his mind. "What is this?" "It's called an apple, Mrs. Sinclair. Perhaps you've heard of them? They're quite popular among people who enjoy not collapsing from low blood sugar during important meetings." Evelyn stared at the apple, then at him, then back at the apple. "Are you mothering me, Mr. Rivers? I prefer to think of it as preserving my job security. Hard to drive you around if you pass out in the back seat." She took the apple, and if she smiled slightly as she bit into it, neither of them mentioned it. Then there was the matter of Sophie. Evelyn learned that Ethan couldn't afford after-school care on the days he worked late, which was most days. Without consulting him, she instructed Margaret to convert one of the unused offices on her floor into a play area, complete with toys, books, and a comfortable couch for napping. When Ethan discovered what she had done, he found her in her office and stood before her desk with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Why did you?" Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, and something passed between them, something that made her heart beat just a little faster. "Because every child deserves a safe place to be. And because you shouldn't have to choose between providing for your daughter and being there for her." Ethan swallowed hard, his usual quick wit failing him entirely. "Thank you," he said simply, and the words carried more weight than any eloquent speech could have. If this story is already touching your heart, imagine what happens next. Keep watching because the moment that changes everything is just around the corner. The months continued to pass, and the walls between them began to crumble. Ethan learned that Evelyn's cold exterior was armor, developed over years of fighting in a male-dominated industry where showing emotion was seen as weakness. He learned that she had wanted children desperately, but her husband had refused, and by the time she was ready to do it alone, her doctors told her it was too late. He learned that she spent Christmas alone every year, eating takeout in her cavernous mansion because she had no family left to share it with. Evelyn, in turn, learned about Ethan's past. He had been a promising architecture student, his designs praised by professors and professionals alike. But when his girlfriend got pregnant during his senior year, he dropped out to support her, taking whatever work he could find. When she left, she took not only his heart but also the small inheritance his parents had left him, draining their joint account and disappearing into the night. He had rebuilt his life piece by piece, putting his dreams aside to ensure Sophie never felt the instability of her early years. "You could go back to school," Evelyn said one evening as Ethan drove her home from a late meeting. "Finish your degree. I could help arrange." "No." The word was sharp, unexpected. "I didn't mean to offend you," Evelyn said carefully. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "I don't want your charity, Mrs. Sinclair. I work for you, and that's enough." "It wasn't charity." "It was." She stopped, unsure what it was. "What?" Ethan met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "What was it?" Evelyn looked away first. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But neither of them could forget. Neither of them could pretend that something wasn't growing between them, something that terrified them both for entirely different reasons. The turning point came on a night that seemed ordinary until it wasn't. Evelyn had a dinner meeting at her mansion, a rare event that she hosted only for her most important clients. The catering company had confirmed, the staff had been briefed, and everything was in place for a perfect evening. And then everything fell apart. The catering company called an hour before the guests were due to arrive, apologizing profusely for a scheduling error. They wouldn't be coming. The staff, unfamiliar with the kitchen and panicking, were useless. Evelyn stood in her immaculate living room, dressed in an elegant gown, facing the complete destruction of a deal she had been cultivating for months. Ethan found her there, having arrived early to ensure the parking arrangements were in order. He took one look at her face and understood immediately. "What happened?" Evelyn explained in clipped tones, her composure cracking at the edges. Ethan nodded slowly, then did something that shocked them both. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and headed toward the kitchen. "What are you doing?" "I told you I was an excellent cook," he called over his shoulder. "Time to prove it." What followed was nothing short of miraculous. Ethan moved through the kitchen like he had been born there, creating dishes from whatever ingredients he could find. Evelyn found herself drafted as his assistant, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces under his patient instruction. At one point, she splattered herself with tomato sauce, and Ethan laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that seemed to fill the empty spaces of the mansion. "You have a little something," he said, reaching out to wipe her cheek with a kitchen towel. His fingers lingered just a moment too long, and suddenly they were standing very close, the air between them charged with something electric. The doorbell rang, shattering the moment. The dinner was a triumph. Ethan served each course himself, charming the clients with his easy manner and quick wit. By the end of the evening, the deal was not only saved but secured for an even larger amount than originally planned. After the last guest departed, Evelyn found Ethan in the kitchen, washing dishes despite her protests. "You saved me tonight," she said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan turned to face her, dish towel in hand. In the soft light of the kitchen, with her hair slightly disheveled and her perfect composure finally relaxed, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "You don't have to thank me. That's what friends are for." "Is that what we are? Friends?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "I don't know what we are," Ethan admitted. "I know what we can't be. You're my boss. I'm a single father with $47 in savings and a mountain of debt. You're a billionaire who could have anyone she wanted. This doesn't exactly seem like a story that ends well." Evelyn stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and intoxicating. "What if I don't care about how the story ends? What if I just want to know what happens next?" Ethan's resolve wavered. He had spent months telling himself that his growing feelings for her were inappropriate, impossible, a fantasy that could only lead to heartbreak. But standing here, in this moment, with her looking at him like he was the only person in the world who had ever truly seen her, all his carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "I know," she whispered back. "We should stop. Walk away right now. We should." Neither of them moved. And then, before he could think better of it, before reason could reassert itself, Ethan leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when she kissed him back, when her hands came up to cup his face, something ignited between them that could not be undone. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Evelyn looked at him with tears glistening in her eyes. "I forgot romance existed," she whispered. "I forgot what it felt like to be wanted. This is wrong. Everything about this is wrong. You work for me. I'm old enough to, the board would never, we can't." She was rambling, something he had never seen her do. He silenced her with another kiss, softer this time. "Then we figure it out," he said. "Together." But what happened next would change everything, and neither of them was prepared for the intensity of what they were about to discover. The following week brought a business trip that would test every boundary they had carefully maintained. Evelyn needed to inspect a property 3 hours outside the city, a historic estate she was considering for restoration and development. The inspection would take most of the day, making an overnight stay necessary. They arrived at the estate as the sun began its descent, painting the old mansion in shades of gold and amber. The property was breathtaking, a Victorian masterpiece that had fallen into disrepair but still retained its original grandeur. Evelyn walked through the empty rooms, her designer heels echoing on dusty hardwood floors, while Ethan followed with a flashlight as the electricity had been disconnected years ago. "It has good bones," Ethan observed, running his hand along an ornate banister. "The architecture student in me is practically salivating." Evelyn turned to look at him, a smile playing on her lips. "The architecture student is still in there, isn't he? Buried under all those practical concerns and responsible decisions. He makes an appearance now and then. Usually when he sees something beautiful." Their eyes met, and the double meaning of his words hung in the air between them. The local inn was small and quaint, and due to a regional festival, only one room remained available. They stood at the front desk, the elderly innkeeper looking at them with knowing eyes. "We can find somewhere else," Ethan said quickly. "Don't be ridiculous," Evelyn replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're adults. We can share a room without it being an issue." But as they climbed the narrow staircase to their room, both of them knew that nothing between them was simple anymore. The room was cozy, dominated by a large 4-poster bed covered in a handmade quilt. A small fireplace crackled in the corner, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Evelyn set down her overnight bag and turned to find Ethan standing by the window, his back to her. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll take the chair." "Ethan." Something in her voice made him turn. She was standing in the center of the room, her silky hair catching the firelight, her eyes holding a vulnerability he had never seen before. "I'm tired of pretending," she said softly. "I'm tired of fighting what I feel every time I look at you. I'm tired of being alone in a crowd, of going home to an empty house, of forgetting what it feels like to be touched by someone who actually sees me." Ethan crossed the room to stand before her. "Evelyn, if we do this, there's no going back. Everything changes. Everything has already changed. The moment you walked into my office with that terrible tie and that sleeping angel in your arms, everything changed. I've just been too afraid to admit it." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I'm not the kind of man you should be with. I have nothing to offer you except complicated baggage and a 4-year-old who thinks dinosaurs are a major food group." Evelyn laughed through the tears that had started to fall. "You have everything to offer me. You offer me laughter when I've forgotten how to smile. You offer me honesty in a world full of pretense. You offer me the chance to feel like a woman again instead of just a name on a building. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and fast beneath her palm. Make me feel alive again, Ethan. Please. He kissed her then, not the tentative kiss of their first encounter, but something deeper, more primal. His hands tangled in her silky hair as she pressed herself against him, years of loneliness and longing pouring out in a single moment of connection. They moved toward the bed slowly, neither wanting to rush, both wanting to savor every second of this surrender. Evelyn felt his hands at the zipper of her dress, felt the fabric slide down her shoulders like water, felt the cool air on her skin followed immediately by the warmth of his touch. You're beautiful, he breathed, looking at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. How did I get so lucky? We got lucky together, she whispered back. What followed was a night of tenderness and passion, of whispered confessions and shared vulnerabilities. Evelyn, who had forgotten what it felt like to be desired, found herself awakening under his touch like a flower turning toward the sun. Ethan, who had convinced himself that love was a luxury he couldn't afford, discovered that some treasures are worth any risk. They explored each other with the patience of people who had learned that rushed moments are quickly forgotten, while slow ones last forever. Every kiss was a conversation, every touch a promise. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness, of two puzzle pieces finally finding their match. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the fire burning low in the grate. Evelyn traced patterns on Ethan's chest, marveling at how natural it felt to be in his arms. I haven't felt this way in. I don't know if I've ever felt this way, she admitted. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Neither have I. And for the record, I'm terrified. Of what? Of how much you mean to me. Of how completely you've dismantled every wall I spent years building. Of the fact that I would burn the world down to protect what we have right now. Evelyn propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him. Then we protect it together. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we face them as a team. She kissed him again, and the fire that had banked between them roared back to life. The night continued, passion giving way to tenderness and back again, until they finally fell asleep in each other's arms as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. But what neither of them knew was that their moment of stolen happiness had not gone unobserved. Back in the city, someone had been tracking Evelyn's movements. Someone who would use what they discovered to destroy everything she had built. And the storm that was coming would test their fragile connection in ways neither of them could imagine. If you want to see how Evelyn and Ethan fight for their love against impossible odds, keep watching. The best part of their story is still ahead. The next few weeks existed in a strange duality. During the day, Ethan and Evelyn maintained their professional distance, careful to give no indication that anything had changed between them. But in stolen moments, in empty conference rooms and quiet corners of the parking garage, they found each other. Evelyn was terrified. She had spent so long building walls around her heart, convincing herself that love was a weakness she couldn't afford. And now, with Ethan, all those walls were crumbling, and she didn't know whether to embrace the freedom or run from the vulnerability. Ethan wrestled with his own demons. He had Sophie to think about. Every decision he made affected her, and getting involved with his billionaire boss seemed like exactly the kind of risk a responsible father shouldn't take. But every time he resolved to end things, Evelyn would look at him with those dark eyes, and he would lose himself all over again. One evening, Evelyn asked Ethan to bring Sophie to the mansion. She claimed it was because she had business to discuss and knew he couldn't find childcare on short notice, but they both knew the truth. She wanted to know his daughter, to understand the little person who meant everything to him. Sophie, with the unerring instinct of children, took to Evelyn immediately. She showed her the stuffed bunny, explained in great detail the names and personalities of each of her imaginary friends, and insisted on braiding Evelyn's silky hair with the serious concentration of a 4-year-old artist. Evelyn sat on the floor of her living room, her designer dress wrinkled and her hair a disaster, and felt happier than she had in decades. When she looked up and saw Ethan watching them with an expression of wonder and love, something clicked into place inside her. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Ethan froze. Sophie, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment, continued working on her braiding masterpiece. "You don't have to say anything," Evelyn added quickly, suddenly afraid. "I know it's too soon, I know this is complicated, I love you too." The words were quiet but certain, and they changed everything. But their happiness was not meant to last unchallenged. Raymond Sinclair, Evelyn's ex-husband, had been watching her success from afar with growing resentment. The company he had dismissed as worthless when he left her had grown into an empire that made his own ventures look pathetic in comparison. He had been waiting for an opportunity to hurt her, to take back some of the power he felt she had stolen from him. And now, through a network of spies and informants, he had exactly what he needed. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across every business publication and gossip site in the country. Evelyn Sinclair, billionaire CEO, caught in a secret affair with her employee. The photos were damning, grainy shots of their stolen kisses and intimate moments from that night at the inn. The headlines were worse, speculating about her mental fitness, her judgment, her ability to lead. The board called an emergency meeting. Shareholders demanded answers. And through it all, Evelyn sat in her office, watching her life's work crumble around her. Ethan burst through the door, ignoring Margaret's protests. "I'm resigning," he said without preamble. "This is my fault. I'll make a statement, explain that I pursued you, that you were a victim of." "Stop." Evelyn's voice was ice, but beneath it, Ethan could hear the tremor of barely contained emotion. "I will not let you fall on your sword for me. This is not your mess to clean up. Evelyn, please. The company, your reputation, will survive or they won't. But I will not let the first real thing I've felt in 20 years be sacrificed on the altar of public opinion." She stood and walked to the window, her back to him, shoulders rigid with tension. "Do you know what I realized when I saw those headlines this morning? I realized I was more afraid of losing you than of losing all of this. And that terrified me. Because I have spent my entire life building this empire, protecting it, making it my whole world. And now, some 32-year-old single father with a terrible tie and a sharper wit than anyone I've ever met has made me question everything." She turned to face him, and there were tears streaming down her face, the first he had ever seen her shed. "I love you, Ethan. I love you in a way that I didn't think I was capable of anymore. And I don't know what happens next, but I know that I don't want to face it without you." Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides and took her in his arms. She clung to him, this powerful woman who had intimidated boardrooms and crushed competitors, trembling in his embrace like a leaf in a storm. "Then we face it together," he said into her hair. "Whatever comes, whatever they throw at us. Together. This is the moment where everything could fall apart or come together. Stay with us to see how their love story unfolds." The battle that followed was brutal. Raymond Sinclair, now revealed as the source of the leaked photographs, launched a full campaign to discredit Evelyn. He gave interviews claiming she had been unstable for years, that her judgment was compromised, that the company needed new leadership. He rallied shareholders who were already nervous about the scandal, pushing for a vote of no confidence. But Raymond had underestimated 2 things: Evelyn's resilience and the loyalty she had built over 20 years of treating her employees with respect. Margaret, who had been with Evelyn since the beginning, organized a counter-campaign. Employees came forward with stories of Evelyn's kindness, her mentorship, her fair dealing. Business partners publicly expressed their confidence in her leadership. And when the board finally convened to decide her fate, the room was full of supporters who had come to testify on her behalf. Ethan sat in the gallery, Sophie on his lap, watching Evelyn face down her accusers with the same steely determination that had built her empire. She did not apologize for loving him. She did not beg for understanding. She simply presented the facts of her leadership, the growth of the company, the success of her vision, and challenged anyone to find fault with her record. The vote was close, but in the end, Evelyn retained her position by a comfortable margin. Raymond, exposed as a bitter ex-husband with a vendetta, saw his own reputation destroyed in the process. But the victory was not without cost. The stress of the battle had taken its toll on Evelyn, and for the first time in her life, she was forced to confront the limitations of her own strength. She collapsed during a late-night working session, and Ethan found her unconscious at her desk, surrounded by papers that suddenly seemed utterly meaningless. The hospital stay was brief but terrifying. Exhaustion, the doctor said. Her body simply demanding the rest she had denied it for decades. As she lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than Ethan had ever seen her, he held her hand and made a decision. "Marry me." Evelyn's eyes widened. "What? Marry me?" "Not because of the scandal or the press or any of that nonsense. Marry me because I love you. Because Sophie loves you. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Because you make me believe in second chances." Evelyn stared at him, this man who had crashed into her carefully controlled life and turned it upside down. She thought of all the reasons to say no, all the complications and challenges that lay ahead. And then she thought of how empty her life had been before him, how cold her mansion had felt before Sophie's laughter filled its halls, how long she had gone without feeling truly alive. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was small, held in the garden of Evelyn's mansion with only their closest friends in attendance. Sophie served as flower girl, scattering petals with enthusiastic abandon. Margaret cried throughout the ceremony, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief while pretending she wasn't emotional at all. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and Ethan kissed his bride under the setting sun, something shifted in the universe. Two broken people, brought together by chance and held together by choice, had found in each other the completion they had been seeking all their lives. But their story was not quite over. There was still one more chapter to be written. 3 years after their wedding, Evelyn stood in the nursery of their home, looking down at the sleeping infant in the crib. Adoption had not been an easy process, especially at her age, but when she held their daughter Grace for the first time, every obstacle melted away into insignificance. Ethan appeared in the doorway, Sophie at his side. At 7 years old, Sophie had grown into a beautiful girl with her father's wit and a fierce protective streak toward her new baby sister. "She's sleeping again?" Sophie whispered. "Babies do that a lot," Evelyn whispered back, smiling. "It seems inefficient." Evelyn laughed, gathering Sophie into a hug. "You're definitely your father's daughter." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Ethan and Evelyn sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. "Do you ever regret it?" Evelyn asked. "Giving up your chance to finish your degree, to pursue architecture?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I used to. For a long time, I felt like a failure, like I had thrown away my potential. But now I understand that the path I was supposed to take was never about buildings or designs. It was about getting here, to this moment, with you." He reached over and took her hand. "Besides, I finally finished that degree last month. Online courses aren't quite as glamorous as traditional university, but the diploma looks the same on the wall." Evelyn sat up, genuinely surprised. "You finished your degree? Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it on my own. You've given me so much, Evelyn. The job, the stability, this family. I needed something that was just mine, that I earned through my own effort." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pride, of love, of overwhelming gratitude for the man beside her. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she said. "And I need you to know something. Everything I've accomplished, the company, the wealth, the success, it all means nothing compared to what you've given me. You taught me that it's never too late to find love. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. You gave me a family when I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone." She turned to face him fully, the moonlight illuminating her features. "You saved me, Ethan. You walked into my office with a sleeping child and a borrowed tie, and you saved me from a life of empty achievement and lonely success." Ethan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, the same intoxicating fragrance she had worn the night they first kissed in the kitchen. "We saved each other," he said. "That's what love does. It finds the broken places and makes them whole." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found in each other something neither had dared to hope for. The road ahead would have its challenges, as all roads do. But they would face them together, with the knowledge that the greatest adventures often begin in the most unexpected ways. As Evelyn leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, she thought about all the walls she had built, all the years she had spent convincing herself that love was not for her. And she was grateful, more grateful than words could express, that a young father with a borrowed tie and a sleeping child had crashed through those walls and shown her that it's never too late to begin again. If this story has touched your heart, if it has made you believe in second chances, if it has reminded you that love can find us when we least expect it, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing stories of hope, love, and redemption to viewers around the world. And now, as we close this chapter of Ethan and Evelyn's story, we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below with your country, and let's see how far this story of love has traveled. From the busy streets of New York to the beaches of Australia, from the mountains of Nepal to the villages of Africa, love speaks a universal language that connects us all. Remember this, no matter how many walls you've built around your heart, no matter how many times you've been hurt, no matter how convinced you are that love has passed you by, there is always hope. The right person might walk into your life when you least expect it, in the most unlikely circumstances, wearing a borrowed tie and carrying more love than you ever thought possible. Your story is still being written, and the best chapters may yet be ahead. Keep believing, keep hoping, and never give up on the possibility of finding your own happily ever after. Because if Ethan and Evelyn taught us anything, it's that love doesn't follow our schedules or respect our plans. It simply arrives, transforms us, and reminds us what it means to be truly alive.